bonsoir. Je souhaite vous exprimer toute ma gratitude pour l'opportunité qui m'a été donnée aujourd'hui de présenter les projets de la réforme constitutionnelle de l'Italie dans le cadre prestigieux et de grande culture qu'est la Sorbonne. Et je voudrais dire combien je suis désolée pour ne pouvoir faire mon intervention en français et en anglais, car je ne maîtrise malheureusement pas assez votre langue. And donc, I thank AISES and its president and also the Université de la Sorbonne for this invitation. It's a great pleasure to take part to your initiative and to share with all of you some of Italian government's priorities and to elaborate on the ongoing constitutional reform process. As Professor Coricelli said, for quite some time, Italy has been a country of political stability. Since the Second World War, we have had 63 governments, and these and the lengthy legislative process have made it very difficult to bring about any significant reform and change to our country. And as you know, since Renzi's government, our government came to office, it has been firmly convinced that a key to comprehensive and long-distance political success is the transformational reform of political and institutional system. In order to achieve a more political stability and more administrative efficiency to adopt and implement all the new laws. And we know it's a very ambitious and wide-ranging program of reforms, including public administration, electoral law, education, taxation, labor market reform, demonstrating our government intention to rejuvenate our country in all sectors. And yes, I would like also underline that the measures that we recently adopted in our country have a common denominator. They are aimed at encouraging investment and increasing the confidence of Italian and foreign businesses. And in this perspective, the restructuring the political and economic system should proceed in synergy. And the recent initiative promoted by the President of the French National Assembly, Mr. Macron, related to a comprehensive rapport du groupe de travail sur l'avenir des institutions préfère la démocratie, tackling the issue of institutional reform of the Fifth Republic from many angles, taking into account the legal, political, economic and social challenges. This is in the same spirit that motivates the Italian constitutional reform. In this context, the Italian constitutional reform bill, strongly supported by our President of the Republic, Sergio Mattarella, and by the past President, Giorgio Napolitano, was presented as one of the first steps of our government. We presented the bill to Senate, and the Senate approved the last month for the second time the constitutional reform, and it is now under the examination by the Chamber of Deputies for the second time. And the reform is aimed at overruling the perfect bicameralism and transforming the Senate and reforming the division of responsibilities between the national and subnational governments. With the constitutional reform, Italy aims at becoming a full member of those that Professor Le Carcassonne defined as the modern democracies. For its with our constitutional reform can be compared to the French 2008 constitutional reform. The need to modernize institutions is the same. but the premises of French and Italian reforms are different, due to the different frame of government in our countries. While in France you are trying to reinforce the role of parliament and counterpowers, in Italy we need to give the government more effective powers to achieve its political program. In addition to that, our constitutional reform finally implements the regional state with a form of sub-state organization as conceived by the Constituent Assembly, and that has been regulated by our Constitution since 1948. This model that promoted at the end of the Second World War the role and function of regions as counterparts of the states was modified in 2001 to give regions more responsibilities and wider legislative powers. Right now, after the unsatisfactory experience of the constitutional reform, we need to reinforce the role of the state in strategic and national policies further following the indication of the Constitutional Court. We have been discussing the reform of the bicameral system for over 30 years. Now, the economic situation tells us we have no alternative but to change the Constitution. Thankfully, the political class and citizens alike are now aware of this. Furthermore, the constitutional reform redesigns the structure of the bicameral parliament, altering the nature and the composition of the Senate that becomes a chamber representing regional and local institutions. The reform also centralizes some legislative functions once shared with regions. This is aimed at outlining a clear and, for that reason, less adversarial multi-level governance system. This will certainly foster wider strategic choices in line with national and international priorities. For example, the attribution of an exclusive responsibility to the state for the protection and promotion of competition, the strategic infrastructures, and the active labor market policies are consistent with the necessity to make national legislation uniform and coherent in strategic sector for development. In the ongoing constitutional reform, it is clear to see the will to revitalize the country, not only in key domestic institutional mechanisms, but also in terms of creating a system which can achieve a proper and timely adjustment to economic and social changes, occurring at national, European, and international levels. Let me recall some of the specific changes introduced by the reform. The composition and the function of the Senate had long been discussed, even in the Constituent Assembly that wrote our Constitution of 1948. Over the years, this debate has always influenced and political discussion. With the ongoing reform, the Senate becomes a second-tier body consisting of 100 members. Now they are 315. 95 senators proportionally elected by the regional councils and autonomous provinces from among their members and mayors, plus 5 senators appointed by the President of the Republic for their outstanding merits for a 7-year mandate. Senators represent territorial institutions. This aspect is similar to the French Senate in nature as far as the indirect method of election is concerned. During the last examination of the reform carried out by the Senate, an amendment was approved requiring that the regional councils elect candidates according to the choices made by citizens at the time of the election of the council. This will make the connection between the regional electorate and the senators representing every region even closer. Bear in mind the role and the functions of the Senate, as in France. Only the Chamber of Deputies votes to indicate confidence in government. Now both chambers vote to indicate confidence in the government. In order to overrule perfect bicameralism, the bill envisages a simplification of legislative procedure. On one hand, the bicameral legislative procedure provided for an expressly defined number of laws, such as constitutional reforms and constitutional laws. Now it will be extended to some other categories of legislation, mostly connected to the nature of the new Senate. On the other hand, the rejection of amendments proposed by the Senate that can be overridden by the Chamber through a vote of absolute majority by its members, has been limited to only one matter, the activation of the supremacy clause. For any other issue, the Senate can only advise the Chamber, which has the power to express the final decision. This change indicates many similarities with the French parliamentary system, in which l'Assemblée nationale has the last word on the proposed law to overcome the stoppage of the navette. In all cases, the intervention of the Senate links the needs of state legislation with those of regional legislations, avoiding subsequent conflicts between the state and regions that would otherwise require the intervention of the Constitutional Court. All the above-mentioned changes are designed to make the legislative process more efficient. Furthermore, the bill aims to eradicate the causes of delays in the decision-making process and defines, if requested by the government, a timeline for the approval of priority bills with the introduction of a mechanism of voting by a set date, within 70 days if that bill is crucial for the government's program. This preferential lawmaking process does not cover, inter alia, bicameral laws, electoral laws, the ratification of international treaties and laws requiring absolute majorities. I should say that the initial text of the bill allowed the government to choose not only the date, like the French ordre du jour prioritaire, but also the content for the approval, as it is for the vote bloqué. The system adopted, resulting from the amendment during the parliamentary examination, represented a type of rationalized parliamentary system, although I believe that the combination of the two instruments, as it is in France, was the best solution to enable the government and parliament to operate more efficiently. In this respect, I would like to remind you of what Professor Piero Calamandrei, one of the founding fathers of the Italian Constitution, said before the Constituent Assembly. If a democratic system cannot give itself a government that governs, it is condemned. Finally, and in connection with the renewed inter legis, the bill provides for more several rules concerning the use of decree laws, including constraints concerning their content. Even the new procedure of a scheduled vote on bills represents an important device to dissuade the use of decree laws. Thanks to the new procedure of scheduled votes on bills and the limiting of decrees, the Parliament and the government shall be encouraged to legislate with ordinary laws. In conclusion, these are real democratic guarantees that represent a counterweight to the powers of the government concerning its legislative work. Some additional provisions concerning constitutional guarantees have been introduced to balance the new dimension of government and the effect of the new electoral law that assigns an absolute majority to the winning party. In particular, the quorum required for the election of the President of the Republic has been strengthened in order to provide more guarantees and a greater political involvement for parliamentary minorities. A majority of 3/5 is required from the 4th ballot, and the majority of 3/5 of voters from the 7th ballot. The bill establishes the possibility for at least a quarter of MPs and 1/3 of senators to submit electoral laws to the Constitutional Court for a preliminary judgment, as it is similar in France. As in France, the reform states that only the standing orders of the Chamber of Deputies can fix the statute of the opposition. Another aim of the constitutional reform is to reallocate the powers between the state and regions. Indeed, the current division of competencies has been characterized by strong fragmentation and the division of legislative responsibilities between the state and regions, and because of this, the entire system suffers from uncertainty concerning legislation, the implementation of policies, overlaps, and conflicts. All aspects have had an influence on the development of coherent economic and structural policies. The reform bill gives the state competence on both the decision requiring wider strategic choices and on the decisions that require uniform treatment throughout the country for citizens of all regions. The reform foresees the elimination of the concurrent or shared legislative competencies between state and regions, aiming at reducing constitutional litigation that has congested the Constitutional Court, which should be dealing more with fundamental rights than with distribution of powers. The introduction of a supremacy clause, as mentioned before, whereby the state, on a government proposal, can legislate on matters or factions falling outside its exclusive legislative competences to preserve the legal or economic unity of the Republic or the national interest of the state. The possibility for the state to give regions its legislative tasks for some matters falling under its exclusive competence if their budget is in balance. The abolition of the constitutional provision on provinces. On the public spending side, it is up to state legislation to fix standard indicators of costs and needs in order to implement a more efficient allocation of resources concerning the delivery of public functions of all autonomous entities, regions and municipalities. Moreover, people in charge of government institutions in regions and local authorities may be stripped of their function in the event of serious financial trouble. The emoluments of the member regional organs are subject to caps. Allowances for political groups in regional councils are to be abolished. In parallel and in combination with the constitutional reform, Italy has a new electoral system for the election of the Chamber of Deputies, approved on the 4th of May of this year, and to enter into force from July the next year. Aimed at ensuring governability, the law provides for facilitating the formation of a stable majority in Parliament, and therefore a stable government that serves in its full 5-year term. It reduces at the same time the fragmentation of political parties, and it puts an end to the veto power of small political parties. With the new electoral law, if a party reaches a consensus of 40%, there will be rewarded 55% of the seats, allowing for stability, credibility, rapid decision-making, and the ability of the government to complete its 5-year term. It also produces a closer link between candidates and their constituents, and moreover for effective rules concerning gender equality in elections. The electoral reform concerns only the election of the Chamber of Deputies, as the reform of the Senate will transform it into a second-tier body. It is to be a proportional system with a majority bonus for the party with the highest number of valid votes that exceeds the threshold of 40% of the vote. The majority bonus is set at 15% of the seats to enable the winning party to have 340 out of 630 seats. In particular, according to the new electoral law, the Italicum, regions are divided into 100 constituencies, with a given number of seats for each constituency in proportion to the number of inhabitants. Each party submits an electoral roll, and every citizen can express up to 2 preferences for a male and a female candidate, and the heads of the list are automatically elected if the list obtains the necessary votes. Electoral rolls must ensure gender equality and cannot include more than 2 consecutive candidates of the same sex. A party needs a minimum of 3% of the vote to get a seat in Parliament. Alliances at the second ballot are not allowed between lists. This means that between the first and the second round, parties excluded from the ballot cannot enter into agreement with one of the 2 lists that have passed the first round. Our Prime Minister, Matteo Renzi, announced the government plan to hold a referendum for the next year, regardless to the majority the bill is approved by. And I think this is the sign of the government intention is willing to listen to the people. As we all know, today more than ever, Europe needs stable government that displays strong commitments. In the years to come, Europeans and European states will be facing challenging choices, and modern democracies should have all political and institutional tools to respond adequately and promptly to every need. I'm sure Italy will have the decent institutional framework to comply with this. We are highly optimistic on this. I have talked about today reforms that are only the beginning. With will and determination, we will continue to transform and reform our country. And we are convinced, we think that our best days and our best achievements are yet to come. Thank you. I need to answer to the Professor Coricelli question, but
we have time.
Yes, we have time, and I'll do it.